You've just started your business this year, and you're doing photo and video, and you've done seniors, you've done bands, you've done some commercial stuff, you've done weddings. What have you delivered? Have you delivered anything other than digital files?
No.
Okay, so you've got digital files as one product. Okay, what kinds of things have you been asked to create for portrait clients? Like, so you were telling me earlier that somebody asked you to help you plan out, like,
Right.
what to put in their house.
Right.
What kind of stuff did you recommend, or would you recommend, or what are you interested in selling?
Well, for that particular person, I knew that they didn't want anything other than regular print photos.
Okay.
But I'm much more interested in selling albums and even like canvases or medals or things that actually will last and like are long term, as opposed to just a print.
Perfect. And that right there, even thinking about that for your client and going away from digital files can garner you a higher rate to start for a session fee. So when you're getting into pricing your work, you have kind of two things that go into it. You have one is the actual session fee. I would call it a creative fee instead of a session fee, because why? Why would you call it creative fee over session fee?
Sounds better?
Sounds better. It immediately takes you, a lot of photographers, a mistake they made because they say, oh, I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to shoot you, because that's how we talk. Your client doesn't want to be shot. They literally think you're shooting them with a gun. Don't use the word shooting on your website, in your advertising, or in person. It's either a session fee, a creative fee, the creative experience, even experience is fine. It's anything that you're doing that's boutique, that's unique. You're snapping them out of like, oh, I need to hire a photographer to take my picture. Like, well, give me your iPhone and then it's $100. Like, you know, and a drink, because that's still like my time, you know. But so think about session fee versus creative fee. If you're doing commercial, it absolutely needs to be a creative fee, 100%. But I would also instigate portraits also would be a creative fee, and weddings maybe less so, because with weddings they've looked at you and you already fit, your vision already fits their wedding, so it's less of interesting as a creative, but you'd call it a wedding anyway, right? So these two, you'd call it a creative fee. So the creative fee, what kind of stuff comes out of the creative fee? Price-wise, like when you're building your price list, what kind of stuff would go into the time it takes to take a picture that we've already talked about?
All of the cost of doing business, the cost of goods sold.
Well, cost of goods sold are going to go over here.
So your creative fee would just be your cost of doing business.
Cost of doing business, and what else goes in here? But also you want income,
oh, right.
profit, whatever, all that stuff too. So a little bit of that goes in there too. Like so that way if you're shoot and burn, you need to make sure you're covering your costs, okay? And that is a huge piece of the puzzle people forget when they're shooting and burning. They think the digital files are worthless, which they are. So they only charge for the session fee and they give out the files. But they're still not charging enough for the session fee to cover it, to cover the loss of sales. This is why we go through this, because that's the way I look at it. If somebody's a shoot and burn photographer, and I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. I know a lot of photographers that charge enough up front that they've actually built in the price of the files, what the files should cost. I'll get into that in a second. But they're not charging $200 to shoot a family portrait and giving out the files. If you're shooting $200 to photograph a family portrait and giving out the files, that's all you're ever going to make is $200. That's your cost of doing business, that's your profit, that's everything. And what's happening when you do that and you're doing the files, what you're doing is you're missing all of these sales. You could actually make $3,000 on a portrait if you don't give out the files. So if you give out the files, your portraits need to be $3,000.
Right.
Or whatever, you get my point, okay? So you're literally leaving all this money on the table by not offering products, okay? So even if you want to be a shoot and burn photographer, you need a budget for all that money you're leaving on the table, okay? And you can there's a variety of ways to do that, and that's a whole other video. So let me run through how to do your COGS, because they don't work with the digital files. So I'm going to erase those. Anybody who's giving out digital files and not charging $2,000 for it is working for free. And I'll stop there because I have plenty of rants on that on my YouTube channel. But what I want to talk about now is how to actually price and offer products, and doing this work and flushing this out is what will get you away from doing the digital files. Most people give out the digital files because they don't know what to do. They don't know where to price this stuff, and this is why you're here, which is awesome. So you're ready. You're ready to like take on this information. I know it's a lot of information, but this is where, for me, it gets so much fun. But I'm kind of a nerd about it. Okay, so let me just erase this because we're going to talk about COGS. That's what we're doing right now. It's COGS. Okay. So COGS, we flushed that out in another video. We fleshed out our cost of doing business in another video. And now this is the reason we've done those two things first is now we can have fun with pricing. Okay, so let's keep with the portraits because it's easier. Session fee we're going to work out afterwards. And this is why everyone's doing it wrong. They're like, well, $200 to shoot it. It's 2 hours maybe, a little bit of editing, and again, they're like discounting how much time it takes to edit and client meetings and all that. They think, oh, $200 for like a family pictures in the park is appropriate. No. So we'll get into that as a whole other pricing thing in a second. What I want to talk about is this, so you have a game plan for anything you want to offer. Okay, so do you remember what % of sales I said your COGS needs to be?
25%.
Yeah, good job. Okay, so 25% of your total sales is what you can allocate to cost of goods sold. And you can go up to 30, 35, depending on the product. But that should be your what you're trying to hit is 25 to 30%. Okay. So we've kind of run through the album scenario a few times. So let's take a canvas. Okay. So we are going to take a 16 by 20 canvas. Would you agree that that is a very appropriate, easy thing to sell to someone who's hiring you to do holiday photos?
Yes.
Very appropriate. It's not super gratuitous, but it's not a 4x6, right?
Right.
Okay. I'm glad we're on the same page. Because my thinking is, why hire a photographer if you just want the files? Why even do it? Why hire a photographer if you just want an 8x10? That goes in a drawer. It's not an heirloom. Nobody cares. So if you're going to hire a real photographer, not just your friend or your sister or something, then get at least something out of it. 16 by 20 canvas on the wall is actually tiny.
Yeah.
So to me, this is the baseline. This is, to me, the equivalent of giving out digital files. This should be the starting point. Okay? So this is where it gets fun. Do you agree with that? That that's an easy thing to try to sell from any session, right? Okay. Perfect. So I'm glad. Okay, so we're doing a canvas. And to make it easy on your client, it can also be a metal print or a framed print. Do you have any idea why I just added those two to the same baseline product?
To give them options?
To give them options that don't cost extra for them.
Oh, okay.
So even though they cost different for me, they're definitely a different cost for me, I don't want them to not get a metal print that's totally cool, that they're going to share and talk about with all their friends, and they're the only ones even doing it. I don't want them to not get a metal print because of $50. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So now when you want to price the 16 by 20 canvas metal or framed print, where do we start?
What it costs me to make that? Right.
So you've got our COGS that we've already flushed out. So it's not just the cost of the metal, but also, part of the time. So the nice thing about portraits is that you're going to sell multiple things with the same amount of time. So this, how we flushed out the client meetings and the emailing and the bookkeeping? Well, that now gets broken down by all the products they buy. Mm-hmm. So not one product has to cover all of that, which is why the digital files does. You see now why I'm you need to charge $2,000 for digital files? Because the digital files are 40 products that you could be selling. Right. So now I'm breaking down that 2-hour client meeting into all the different things I'm selling. So I don't need to jump it all into the 16 by 20 canvas. My point here is, if your client's buying a 16 by 20 canvas from you, would you also agree that they're probably going to buy an 8 by 10, they're probably going to buy a 5 by 7 of something, they're probably going to buy maybe a digital file, they might buy holiday cards. So all the things that you end up selling your clients, and it'll change per client, they're all, that whole fee is what's going to come out of those, the other part of the COGS. So this part, you can do the actual tangible. As you get going, you're kind of going to know, like, I'm going to do like plus 20% of intangibles, which is all the time and all that shit. Does that make sense? Yes. That you're breaking up the time it takes to sell the products with all the stuff they buy? Okay. The caveat to that is you can get more for a 16 by 20 than you can for a 4 by 6. So generally speaking, like a 4 by 6, you're going to eat a lot of the time, and that's going to get added to the bigger pieces. That's normal, and it'll make sense to you when you're fleshing it out.
Right.
Okay, so let's say the 16 by 20 canvas costs, just for ease, it's not the right price, but let's say it costs $100, and let's say our time...
Like it cost me $100 to buy it.
Yeah, to actually physically buy it. And that's low, but I'm using it because it's an easy number to do math with. It's probably closer to 150, but... And then let's say 20% of your time that we've already flushed out is $100. And this tangible is also packaging and shipping. So $200. And what did I talk about before? With is always wrong, right? Why? Because they're missing the fourth piece of the puzzle. So at minimum, times it by 4. Cost of doing business, cost of sales, profit, all the stuff, okay? So this 16 by 20 is now $800. And that's it. It's that simple. And you just repeat this for everything.
Makes sense.
Does it make sense? Why, if you were gonna just sell a 16 by 20 to a client not running your numbers, you'd probably say, oh, I'll sell it to you for $250. I guarantee you that's the number that would just pop in your head. And why I'm always screaming at people to triple that made up number is because 250 times 3 is still lower than, like, see what I mean?
Yep.
So we've talked a little bit about sales psychology, and I have lots of opinions on that. But it's so much easier if you do it this way for your customer. Because then in the moment, you can be crazy about it. Like, in the moment, I know that my 16 by 20s are $800. So if they switch teams all of a sudden, they're like, oh, I want a metal print. Well, great, guess what? I only have to remember one number. $800. Great, metal print's $800. Okay, so Canvas, I'm just going to say this real quick. Canvas is very cheap. They're on sale all the time for us. Okay, metals are never on sale. They're more expensive. Framing, you have to actually drive to a store and do it, and it's also usually more money. But metals, I would say, because they're never on sale for us ever, and they're a very unique product also, run your tangible costs on the most expensive thing that you offer. And that way, if they order a canvas, you're just getting like a $50 raise.
Okay, that makes sense.
Does that make sense? And that's how you keep it simple. And honestly, the Cliff Notes version, which is what we've just done, works for everything.
Yeah.
Everything. This is so simple that it works for everything. The reason I did it this way is I want you to think about your own personality and your own business and your own clients and decide what is it that you want them to buy at all anyway. Because guess what? If they want a 20 by 24, instead of a 16 by 20 because it actually fits their house better, no big deal, because all the other stuff has already been accounted for. All you have to do is add a little bit more for the cost, which is negligible. All of the cost is the doing it. Right. And the running the business. $100 canvas is like, that's nothing. That doesn't even, so if this is $125, why stress yourself out on fleshing out all the numbers for everything? I do think it's worth doing, like with an Excel spreadsheet, but it's so easy to plug it in if you have a formula. This is literally like not that difference in actual tangible cost for us. Shipping's even the same. So what the extra cost is all that extra stuff you're not thinking about, right? So a 20 by 24 could be like $8.75. Or something like I would go a little bigger of a jump, but you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And this gives you a base. So that $200 portrait session became a $1,000 portrait session very quickly. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Very, very quickly with just one product. And this is where you can play a little bit of wiggle room. Like $800 for 16 by 20 might be a stretch for like a client. Unless you just happen to like your whole friend group is like people who buy Coach bags and like, you know, spend $200 at Target when they just went in for like diapers. Then I would go ahead and start there. But like for normal people, I would maybe do something that they wouldn't think to do. They're going to think of like 8 by 10s, 4 by 6s, and maybe a 16 by 20. They think a 16 by 20 is wall art. So if you're getting those clients, maybe start your 20 by 24 at the $800. Make this one just a little bit different in price, the 16 by 20, not a lot. But then it kind of snaps them out of like, okay, here's an actual wall art piece for that price. And then they're like, okay, well, yeah, if they bought fine art from an artist, it would cost $800, right? I'm going to talk about albums for a second on the same note. Okay? Is that too much information or you feel good? Okay. So let's run this with an album. And we're going to stick with the portraits. Okay? So again, a portrait album is very different from a wedding album because there's going to be less pictures in it. You can get away with a smaller book, that sort of stuff. I would say a 16 by 20 canvas or something like that is great. And I would also say an album's great. Like anybody can use an album, especially if you're a documentary shooter, then an album is great. Okay, but they don't need anything crazy. If it's a family portrait, you can sell crazy big albums to like bar mitzvahs and stuff, but really if it's just a normal family portrait that's just an hour or two shooting, it's not like a weekend getaway, then you can do a really simple album like an 8 by 8 with like 20 images. Wouldn't you agree that that's fairly easy to sell?
Yeah.
And fairly appropriate, and pretty much any client that wants a book is going to agree that that's appropriate, right? Okay, so here's the thing. Albums for us, when you get into like these cheaper books that you can like really sell easily, they all kind of start at the same, they're all kind of right around the same price, regardless of quality and regardless of everything. So just to buy a professional grade book instead of a blurb book, even a blurb book, but whatever. So even just to buy any book of any quality, it's going to cost between 100, well, maybe 80 if you have a crappy quality, but decent quality, 100 to 150. That's the cost, the actual physical cost of a book from our photo lab. Okay? And you could get an $80 book that's like a press printed, like that looks like a magazine, but what's the problem with that? You can't sell it for a lot because it looks like crap. It looks like a Shutterfly book. So why offer them something they can get themselves, right? So if you spend $20 more, you can actually charge $500 for something. So if you take that cost plus, again, 20% of time, and then your costs, obviously, of designing it is going to be a little bit more and editing a little bit more than just one photo. So you want to add maybe like, I'm just going to be really conservative and add $100 for design time and editing those 20 photos. And here's why. Theoretically, if you're selling a book, you're also selling prints. And those images might go in the book. So you might have less editing to do. And a salesperson should make it that way. So if they've bought a bunch of stuff, sell them a book that you've already done all the work for. You've already edited the photos on these other products. Or if they want a book, say, okay, what if I give you these images, even the digitals, because they're already edited, for another $500? Like try to double time the same photos. So that's where you can be a little bit more freewheeling with like how much editing it takes, because again, you can divide it by all the products they're buying. But still, like with the metal print, you still want to price it originally for like that's the only thing they're buying. So you still want to make sure you're covered anyway, and then you can give them better deals or bulk discounts or bundling, whatever, because you know you've already budgeted the full price of one item. That's a more of an advanced pricing technique, but this gives us the math. So let's say we're doing a $100 album, so it's the same math. So guess what? Look at that. The math is almost the same as that 16 by 20. $100 tangible, $100 of time. And I'm adding $100 for extra time, but you still could do a book for $800.
Right.
So guess what just got really easy for you?
Selling an album.
Selling all of it.
Yeah.
Hey, Jane Smith, you're hiring me for a $200 photo shoot. 16 by 20 is $800. Guess what else is $800? A book. Pick your poison. So this is where it gets fun building packages. Okay, you've decided you want to sell wall art. You decided you want to sell albums. You know what else you have on here? Prints. So what would you do with the prints? You already know that you want your album to be $800. You already know that your canvas is $800. So guess what price your prints are now?
$800.
$800! So, this is how you start building packages, right? And now your average sale is $1,000 for every portrait. Or your base sale, your minimum sale is $1,000 because they're going to do $200 session, which is still too cheap, and they're going to add at least one of these three things. So all your sessions now start at $1,000. Do you see how this works? You see why it gets fun? This is where I get nerdy and fun about it. All of a sudden my tone changed and I'm like, it's the game now, right?
It's money.
Yeah, so you've got canvases that you know you need to make $800. You've got an album you know you want to make $800. And now we're going to make prints equal $800. And all you have to do here is figure out how many prints and what kind is worth $800. And that's a little, and the reason I did it last is because you can't charge the actual costs for a 4x6. That's where you bundle. So let's say they get 10 8x10s, plus they get, 5 5x7s, plus they get 30 4x6s. That's probably not quite right, but you get the idea, right? So how much is 10 8x10s worth? How much is 5 5x7s worth? So I'm sort of flushing this out, thinking this through in a way a newbie would figure it out. So I would never do it this way personally, but this is appropriate for someone starting, and you could do this to digitals also. So let's say you still feel guilty of not giving out the digital files. Like there's a lot of people that just have guilt with it because clients think that's what they want. Well, you can actually figure out, okay, limit how many digitals they get. Okay, you only get 20 digitals, but that's worth $800. You can actually sell it for that. So you could sell it, $800 is now also worth, 20 digitals. Right? Because if you're giving out the digitals, you're not going to get an album or a canvas. Or you're not going to get all these loose prints.
So make sure you get that money somewhere.
Yeah, so you got to get that money somewhere, right? And the reason I say that this is how a newbie would do the math, because I'm literally making it up. I haven't actually figured out what the going rate is for these things. I haven't talked about the cost at all. I'm just assuming I can't get the same price for an 8x10 as a 16x20. But devil's advocate is it takes you the same amount of time to do an 8x10 as it does a 16x20. Like the cost is a little different, but that's it. Just the tangible cost.
So price your biggest one first.
That's why I called it a creative fee. Because you're putting your image on all these things. It doesn't matter how much it costs to actually print it.
Right.
So 4x6 is negligible difference in an 8x10. They're paying for the image that's on that piece of paper. Okay, so the number I'm going to give you to scare the shit out of you that you're not going to do, and I know you won't do it because I'm still having a hard time doing it, but all of these are the same, should be the same price. One 8x10, one 5x7, one 4x6. When you get into a real business, they're called gift prints. Why? Why do we call them gift prints in the industry? Because for them, they're buying cool shit. These are for grandparents. So they're called gift prints on your price list. And again, sales tool. Okay, so in the industry, each print that's 8x10 or smaller, because they all take the same amount of time and they all cost the same, is $75 per print. Can you imagine selling one 4x6 for $75?
No.
That's why I said it was going to scare the shit out of you.
It does.
Okay, but do you see how if your prints are $75, you get to this $800 fee?
So that's where you bundle?
Yeah. And that's where you start giving out digitals to make it, like you get X amount of gift prints and digitals of those gift prints, not other digitals, but digitals of those gift prints.
Huh.
This, I'm not even kidding, is the way it's done. But do you see how simple I made it for you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I feel like I can go through and sit down and crunch them.
It's literally at this stage of things, once you know all this other stuff, at this stage it literally is just an Excel spreadsheet. And again, the price differential on some things is not huge, so you just pick like 5 sizes of canvases that are different sizes. Like I would do, 60 by 20, like people will ask for, that's pretty normal. I wouldn't bother doing smaller canvases because price per unit, it's expensive.
Right.
So that's where they should just get a print, and frame it, buy a frame. Like you can get 11 by 14 frames at Michael's. Like you don't need a canvas of that. Unless you're doing like a collage and then you'd bundle it. But 60 by 20, I would start with that. 20 by 24 is another normal size. 30 by 40. Maybe 40 by 60, and you get to, and then what this does when you do the math on just a few things is you'll start to like figure out your price points. If your 60 by 20 is 800, this is probably going to be 1250. This is probably going to be, 1650. This is going to be 2050, whatever, 1999. And what you want to do when you start building your actual like price list your client sees is simplify it so you can do the math in your head. If it starts at 8, you can just, wall art, not 16 by 20 canvas, wall art starts at $800 and they go up by $400 increments. Like round it out. Right. So once you've done the actual math, then make it pretty and easy and simple. Okay?